السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أهلا بكم إلى هذه الحلقة من برنامج من الداخل عبر الميادين. معكم زينب الصفار. لعل وفاة جورج فلويد ولدت غضبا عالميا ومناشدات حماسية للعدالة العرقية. جورج فلويد كان رجلا جريمته أنه ولد أسود. وفي حديث أحد الناشطين المخضرمين في الحقوق المدنية عن حياة السيد فلويد الصعبة يقول: إن الله أخذ الحجر الممجوج وجعله حجر الزاوية في حركة ستغير العالم بأسره، وأعتقد أن ما حدث هنا هو حقا أحد أهم المنعطفات في التاريخ الأمريكي من حيث الحريات والحقوق المدنية ومعاملة الناس بكرامة. بحسب تقرير لمجموعة عمل خبراء الأمم المتحدة المعنية بالمنحدرين من أصل أفريقي، فإن التاريخ الاستعماري وإرث الاستعباد والتبعية العنصرية والتمييز والإرهاب العنصري وعدم المساواة العرقية والتنميط والكراهية في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية تمثل تحديا خطيرا، حيث لم يكن هنالك التزام حقيقي بالتعويضات وبالحقوق والمصالحة لذوي البشرة السمراء. واليوم لعل ندوب الاستعباد محفورة عميقا حتى في الحمض النووي للسود بحسب الخبراء الأميركيين الأفارقة، إذ إنهم ليسوا مثل أي شخص آخر في شيكاغو أو في أميركا. وأحدث مقياس يوضح ذلك هو معدل الوفيات من فيروس كورونا. ولكن ماذا يعني ذلك من الناحية العلمية؟ وما المقصود بالتعويضات والأشكال التي ينبغي أن تتخذها؟ وما هي المعايير؟ للإجابة عن كل تلك التساؤلات يطيب لنا أن نستقبل من مدينة شيكاغو كام هاورد، الناشط والرئيس المشارك للائتلاف الوطني للسود من أجل التعويضات في أميركا. Cam Howard, National Co-Chair of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America and COBRA. Welcome to من الداخل from the inside, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's our pleasure, dear Cam. Well-informed and honest historians, Cam, and social scientists acknowledge the lingering effects of slavery on present-day African-American life since the MAFA, or the Great Disaster. Accordingly, in 1996 and 1997, the NCOBRA Legal Strategies Commission set out to develop an approach to reparations litigation. The commission's work led to the identification and documentation of the 5 injury areas suffered by African people during and after enslavement. I would appreciate, Cam, if you can tell us what are the 5 injuries of slavery.
So there are, a tremendous amount of injuries from enslavement. They're not just 5, but we have 5 major areas that we focused on that should any type of reparative measurements should address, and they are, and not in a particular order, but education. We know that systematically in this country we were penalized and prohibited from educating ourselves. And then once we were freed from enslavement, liberated ourselves via the Civil War, we fought to have a public school system in this country. At that time, there were no public schools. They weren't even educating poor whites. And we fought to have a public school system. And then we went through a period of fighting to have inclusion or equal education in this country. A lot of the resources, even though we were paying taxes, was targeted toward white schools and universities and not in black schools. And we went through a period in the 1970s where we won a lot of school battles, and there was some affirmative action that took place where we were allowed to get into certain schools, and we began to excel and out-excel whites who were in those schools. And there was a protracted struggle to end affirmative action because of our ability to compete once we were let in the system. And so there's been a decades-long, 4 or 5 decades-long effort at miseducating Black people to keep us from competing competitively in the markets, in the
workforce,
job markets,
yes, in the employment
industry. in this country. So education is a key component. Yeah, of course. Economic development, and I won't be as long as the others, but economic development right now in the city that I live in, Black people have.
What about the rest injuries, Cam? I mean, if you can briefly tell us, if we can just have a highlight of these, you know, the most prominent. I know that your life is full of injuries, but these are the most prominent issues.
So education, economic development, we have a 1% net worth compared to some whites. They have 22 times the amount of net worth that we have in this country. Health, as you know, the coronavirus has highlighted the disproportionate health challenges that we face in this country.
Right.
Criminal punishment, the criminal justice system is another injury area, the fourth injury area. We are 40% of the prison population in this country, but only 13% of the entire population. And the final injury area is peoplehood. Our culture, our identity was stolen from us. We were not allowed to practice our culture, our language, our history, our customs. And that's a major injury area, which, you know, have difficulty many times unifying because of the fragmentation and damage to our identity and our peoplehood in this country.
Right.
So those are the 5 major injury areas.
True. Now, Cam, what is meant by reparations, and what forms should reparations take, and who should receive reparations? I mean, what is the criteria in the sense, and why are African descendants entitled to reparations?
Well, reparations is international law. You know, there's crimes were committed in 2001 at the World Conference Against Racism that was held in Durban, South Africa. The international community declared that the transatlantic slave trade, slavery, apartheid, which we faced 100 years of apartheid, legal apartheid, called Jim Crow segregation in this country. All of those were crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity do not have a statute of limitations. So if the countries or entities that were in place 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 400 years ago, and committed the crimes, they're still guilty today. We deserve reparations because this country became the most wealthiest country on the planet as a result of 246 years of free labor, forced labor, extracted wealth from our bodies to create the wealth that it enjoys and the power that it wields on the entire planet. Reparations is under international norms. There's 5 components of reparations which we are struggling to have redressed in each one of those areas. And again, in no particular order. One component is cessation and guarantees of non-repetition. What bad acts are happening right now, and how do you stop those bad acts, and how do you put in place structures to keep those from happening again? The most current set of bad acts that are happening among Black people around the country and what the world is witnessing is the police terrorism that takes place on a daily basis in our community. As your introduction spoke on George Floyd's death. And let me just say right now, we want to thank the international community, our brothers and sisters on the continent, in the Arab world, in Asia and Europe, who are standing in solidarity with us here in this country as we fight against the police terror and the murder of our people. So we want to thank you.
Yes.
So the second component of reparations is restitution. How do you return the people back to where they would have been had they not been injured in the first place? That's where education, economic development, and other things like that come into place. The third area is compensation. Compensation is monetary damages. Yes, we are fighting for compensation, but we know there's other things also that are needed. The fourth component is satisfaction. How do you return the dignity back to people whose dignity was eroded as a result of the atrocities committed? And the last one is rehabilitation for the heart, spirit, and mind damage. And Corona, and I can talk about, you know, why we are dying at a higher rate than anyone else in this country a little later if you like.
We will talk about this particular issue, scientific issue actually, Cam, but not now. I just want you to tell me briefly in 30 seconds, if I may, before we go for a break, why most Americans oppose reparations for the African-American descendants of slaves, and even the Hispanics are evenly divided on the issue. Why?
Racism. It's a racist culture. America is a blatantly racist culture. And anything pertaining to African people, people of African descent or descendants of enslaved Africans. We don't really, in COBRA, we don't call our ancestors slaves. They were enslaved Africans. And we use the term enslaved and enslavement. And so this country has never seen us as human. And their inability to see us receiving justice is because of that lack of seeing us.
Right. Cam, Howard, do stay with us, sir. We're going to stop now for a short break. And then afterwards, we're going to detail on the issue of the transgenerational epigenetic injury after the break. إن فاصل قصير ونعود. لا تذهبوا بعيدا. أهلا بكم من جديد. Cam Howard, National Co-Chair of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America and COBRA. Welcome back, sir. Well, Cam, you believe that transgenerational epigenetic injury is the cause of the higher Black deaths from COVID-19, the coronavirus. What is transgenerational epigenetic and the transgenerational damage to the Black community's DNA? Tell us more about the science of how trauma is passed down generationally and why this pandemic supports your demand for reparations.
Sure. So transgenerational simply means across generations. Trans means across, and cross generations. Something then happens from generation to generation that's passed down, inherited, if you will. And epigenetics is a field of genetics that deals with the epigenome, which is a part of the gene that switches on and off depending on information that it receives. Then it acts in a certain way. Scientists have known for about 30 years that trauma can be transmitted intergenerationally or transgenerationally. Studies of Jewish Holocaust survivors, studies of Vietnam veterans, studies of Japanese internment victims here in America, their descendants, studies of the Japanese whose ancestors experienced the atomic bombs. Many people in Europe who went through what is called historical trauma, which is traumatic experiences to the entire group of people, not just individuals. So historical trauma means that a group of people went through a traumatic experience together. And science has shown that historical trauma is passed down generationally, 3 and 4 generations. But transgenerational epigenetic injury is a form of science that says this trauma that's passed down generationally also can affect the gene, and it can affect the epigenome, which is part of the gene, and that also is passed down generationally.
Exactly. Also, the apartheid practices against the people in South Africa and the apartheid practices against the Palestinians who were uprooted from their own home and they were suffering and homeless in their own home. This is also carried on.
Yes.
And this is your scientific, perhaps, explanation of what is going on with you, why you are suffering more than others when it comes to COVID-19 in the US of A today.
So when the gene is damaged, several things can happen. It could cause immune system to weaken, or it could cause the immune system to attack itself, which is called autoimmune diseases. So when you look at Black people, we have a higher rates of all these illnesses, high blood pressure, hypertension. You'll find the same thing in the Caribbean among Blacks who also went through enslavement. You don't find it in African, among African Black Africans, continental Africans, but you find it in the diaspora. We have these high rates of diseases, and it's because of what is called the gene damage, but also what is called weathering, where we're under constant stress, and it causes us to prematurely age, and it causes this damage to our immune system and to our bodies, where we develop these illnesses.
Right.
So COVID is an infection that attacks people who have these underlying illnesses, which we have because of the gene damage.
Cam, what are your recommendations to better understand this injury and develop protocols for how to neutralize or reverse the damage of the transgenerational epigenetic effect?
Sure. So we have to have what we call a transgenerational epigenetic injury research center, so we can do the type of research. Right now, there's a lot of research out, written research, but it's done on animals and some on Jewish Holocaust descendants, but mostly done on animals. And so we need type of research that was done in our community by our own doctors, and have that information interpreted by us. We can compile. We know that certain vitamins have reversed the damage in mice. We know that vitamin B complexes. We know that vitamin C has a huge effect. Vitamin D has a huge effect. We know that a diet high in fruit and vegetables has an effect, but we don't know to what extent. And so we need a research center to do the actual research to determine what we can do to either neutralize, minimize, or reverse the injuries of the transgeneration epigenetic effect. And one of the things I'm going to say finally on that is that, in a 2005 lawsuit, the judge who ruled against us said that we were too far removed from the injury. We didn't have competent proof that we were injured as a result of enslavement. But the transgeneration epigenetic injury shows that we wear the scars. We currently wear the scars of enslavement on our DNA. So we have competent proof that we are injured. We have been physically altered as a result of the enslavement and apartheid that took place among our ancestors, and that is continuing today, in a new form.
Now, throughout this country,
we definitely need a research center to millions of dollars directed toward this type of.
Sure. Now, Cam, throughout this country's history, African descendants' efforts to be self-determining have been met with violence, with brutality, and destruction. Today, with respect to the post-George Floyd uprisings, don't you think that it's about time for an awakening?
Oh, most definitely. A lot of people are rethinking the whole concept of integration and assimilation in this country. When we came out of enslavement, Abraham Lincoln sent his general to Savannah, Georgia, and he polled 20 religious leaders at the time. And at that time, 19 out of 20, 95% said they wanted an independent existence. And somehow over the last, from 1865 to current, most of our people have been pushed toward integration and assimilating. In the 1960s and 70s, we had the Black Power movement, where we vociferously and militarily sought to engage in an effort for autonomy, independence, sovereignty, and self-determination in this country. And that was put down militarily by the United States government, CIA and FBI and other agencies. Right now, we have a lot of people, because of George Floyd, because of the continued abuse and neglect of our communities, who are looking at this idea of self-determination again. And we see that it's picking up traction, and there's something that a lot of us who have been in the movement, the Black Power movement, are capitalizing on and organizing around.
My last question for you, in a minute, please, Cam. Today, global and domestic outrage has generated impassioned pleas for racial justice. Why U.S. protests are so powerful this time?
I think that our youth who attacked global property got at first in Minneapolis, attacked a police station. These symbols of white domination and white power, a symbol of racial injustice. Everybody can identify with the police station as being a symbol of injustice around the world. And so when you saw that type of behavior, I think it electrified people, not only in this country, but around the world, to address the systemic racism and the systemic abuse of power and the power in the hands of the elite and the few over the many who are actually the workers and the builders and the producers of wealth. And so I think that it reverberates around the world because we all face the same common enemy of global capital.
Right, right. From Chicago, Cam Howard, National Co-Chair of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America and COBRA. Thank you very much for your precious, eye-opening insights, Cam.
Thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Pure pleasure to have you, sir.
Again, thanks everyone
always welcome.
Thanks everyone for your actions of solidarity with us.
Right.
It's much appreciated.
It's our duty. It's our duty, Cam. والشكر لكم مشاهدينا الكرام على طيب المتابعة. للتفاعل أكثر تابعونا على صفحات السوشيال ميديا من كل فريق عمل برنامج من كل الميادين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.